It is Friday, September 24th. Let's talk PlayStation. Welcome back, everyone. I think it's fair to say this was one of the more quiet weeks when it came to PlayStation news. Not a whole lot going on, but still some things to go over, so we're going to do that. But first up, as always, our PS Plus reminder. The September games, if you haven't just yet, make sure you grab them, download them, or add them to your library. Get that done and out of the way. For our first story, let's talk about Death Stranding Director's Cut. It launches today, so if you're picking it up, I hope you enjoy it. The one thing that we found out during the reviews yesterday when the embargo lifted, or I think it was the 22nd, either way, we just got the reviews pretty much last minute, but it's obviously an improvement over the outgoing game. If anything, it's a much better improvement over, say, Ghost of Tsushima Director's Cut, which didn't really have a whole lot there by way of true visual enhancements to the PlayStation 5 version, but either way, for the Director's Cut, we did find out that for that save file transfer, we already knew this was kind of a pain with the Director's Cut because it's still on what I would presume is the older build of the PS4 SDK, where it doesn't have the proper reading of PS4 save files, so you have to boot up the PS4 game and manually import your save file. But what's even more difficult is that, yes, you have to boot up the game, load up a save file, go to a terminal in the game, and transport your save file from there. But even worse is that if you're in the middle of a bunch of open orders on Death Stranding where you have to, go and deliver them, you have to do those first or clear them before you can transfer your save file. Now, thankfully, you can cancel most of them, but some of them you can't. And in that situation, depending on where you are in the game, that means you have to play your way to earning the ability to properly move over your save file and then start on PS5. This is the the absolute worst of the worst example we've had so far when it comes to transferring save files. So I would hope that the PlayStation 5 version gets updated to just properly read a PS4 save without having to do anything on your end, but this is not really ideal. So that's something to be mindful of if you're picking the game up today. Now, something else that also came out recently was Kena Bridge of Spirits, and I am so glad this game actually reviewed very well. So it's sitting in the low to mid 80s last time I checked, and that's great. So it's available now on PS4, PS5, and PC, but I know a lot of you, like myself included, would like a physical copy, and we did get that confirmed this past week, and you don't have to wait too long. So the temptation is there because it's on PSN right now. You can download it, play it, but if you are interested in a physical copy, that'll be available in November. Maximum Games will be distributing, and it's going to be one of those wide releases, so it should be available in North America, Europe. They've got a branch out in the UK where that should be fulfilling orders pretty much everywhere, and not only from their main website where you can pre-order it now, but it will be showing up in most retailers as well. So I don't think they've actually confirmed which retailers, but usual suspects, I would imagine. I think it would be weird if you don't see this game available at your local Target, Best Buy, GameStop, things like that. And that's fine for me personally because, I've got a bunch of games in my backlog, so by November, that should be something that I'll be ready to pick up and play, so that's good. Also, if you are playing it right now, you might have also noticed there was a recent patch for the game just addressing a number of issues and bugs that some players encountered early on, so that should be cleared up for you as well. Moving on to our next news story, the PlayStation blog has finally published a full list of the pre-order items you can expect for Gran Turismo 7 alongside the 25th Anniversary Edition, and in there's one pretty interesting little good caveat that we'll touch on in a second. But first, to give you a full breakdown, if you pre-order the standard copy of the game, whether that's through the PS Store or retail, you'll be entitled to the Toyota Castrol Tom Supra, Mazda RX Vision GT3 Concept, the Porsche 917 Living Legend, and 100,000 in-game credits. Now, if you go for the 25th Anniversary Edition, the Digital Deluxe Edition, so PS4, PS5, you'll get both of them. And remember, if you buy just the regular version, whether that's at retail or the PS Store, that's a $10 fee to go from PS4 and 5. But if you get the 25th Anniversary Edition, you get both copies. In-game credits goes from 100,000 to 1.6 million. You'll get the Toyota GR Yaris with country-specific livery, 30 manufacturer and partner avatars, the music of Gran Turismo, the official soundtrack, and then the other 3 cars from the standard edition. Now, if you go for the retail version of this, the Anniversary Edition, you get a steelbook with the full game, and you actually get a PS5 disc with a voucher for the PS4 copy. Now, this is, as far as I'm aware, not just for Sony, but I don't think any other publisher has done this, because for those that maybe aren't aware of this, but when it comes to like, game upgrades or, how smart delivery works versus PlayStation, the one thing you can't do on PlayStation is go backwards, right? So you can't buy a PS5 disc, put it in a PS4, and that pulls the PS4 copy. When you buy a PS5 disc, you're committing to only having the PS5 version, but you can buy a PS4 disc, and if the publisher offers it, you can upgrade and therefore have the PS4 and 5 version at the same time. I've never seen the PS5 disc get offered with a download code for PS4, so in theory, if you go for this version of the game, you should be, assuming there's no caveats or some sort of weird tying it to a PSN ID sort of thing, which I don't think they would do. It should be a simple code. That means you can buy the PS5 version of the Anniversary Edition, have the PS5 disc, but also be able to use the PS4 code, for a friend or give it away, sell it, whatever you want to do. So just something to be aware of if you're looking at buying this game when it comes out March 4th, 2022. Now, as for God of War Ragnarok, another game launching next year, one thing that came up this past week was the notion that if you visit the official PlayStation website, one of their general product pages for PS4 and PS5, if you scroll down, you can see a bunch of upcoming releases, and under there you can see God of War Ragnarok next to all these other games that most of them seem to be launching in the short term, right? We're looking at either this year or Q1 2022, and so why would God of War Ragnarok be in there when it says amazing new experiences are just around the corner? This has led many people to think that maybe God of War Ragnarok is going to be within that first quarter, possibly second quarter of next year, like it's sooner than we're expecting. And I feel like this is maybe people just reading too much into things. It's a high-profile game, so it's going to have some sort of imagery being showcased on there. We can also see Ghostwire Tokyo, and if anything, that game is probably in the back half of 2022, just as a safe guess. But also, really, Ragnarok is probably a safe guess for that back half of 2022. Keep in mind that the first 6 months is already looking pretty full. Not to say that God of War Ragnarok can't launch whenever it wants, because Sony can launch that game whenever they want, and it's probably going to do very, very well. But we can look at an expected release timeline, and it makes sense to put God of War in the middle or possibly later half of the year. And if we want to really try and pin down when it could release, PlayStation doesn't often ship big budget games in November or December. Not to say that it can't happen here, just it looks like God of War is probably a prime candidate for calendar year Q3, so not Sony's fiscal year, but that would seem to make the most sense to me. I wouldn't read too much into, a very small thing on the official PlayStation website. People have done that before, and oftentimes that steers them in the completely wrong direction. For our next news story, this coming Sunday, September 26th, is The Last of Us Day, and for those that may have forgotten, this used to be called Outbreak Day, a day where, The Last of Us is celebrated because, well, in-game, that's when the outbreak actually happened, but typically we see things like, cool social media celebrations with people tweeting about the game and posting fan art. Naughty Dog will do, new wallpapers, merchandise, things like that, and sometimes we might get an announcement related to The Last of Us in a more meaningful fashion. And over on the PlayStation blog, this coming Sunday, we should be hearing something is what we're being teased. So not only do we get a new lineup of gear that'll be available on gear.playstation.com, but the designer of communications at Naughty Dog says, and I quote, "In addition to the merch below, we will be revealing all new content on September 26th at 9 p.m. PT, 6 p.m. CET. Be sure to come back and check it out on thelastofus.com/thelastofusday, or TLOU day." I would not get your hopes up, so yes, they are teasing something, but I would expect this to be the typical fanfare on Naughty Dog's part, so keep in mind it's a Sunday. That's not normally when we see major game announcements or reveals or trailers or any sort of, press release. Maybe it'll be a very small, minor tease or just a small little update saying, hey, here's like a screenshot and we'll talk about it soon, or I wouldn't expect factions or anything big, but if we get it, that would be nice. It's just that I think last year, actually, we were in the same situation where we were thinking, oh, maybe we'll hear about factions. Of course, that didn't happen. PS Showcase didn't happen. And really, if it was going to happen, you would do it at the PlayStation Showcase, where Sony Interactive would want that more than anything else. But maybe Naughty Dog said, hey, wait, let's save it for a few weeks when we got The Last of Us Day coming up. I don't think that's what's happening here, but this coming Sunday we should have something happening on thelastofus.com. Next up, we had something pretty miraculous happen this past week, which was what I would consider maybe like a real launch of PS5 and Series X, if that makes sense, because Best Buy stores nationwide here in the US put out a press release, or I don't even know if it was a press release, but more of a store locator confirming to people that, hey, on this particular date, which I think it was Wednesday or Thursday, but basically saying that, hey, we have consoles in store, and here's a store locator to find. If you're local, Best Buy will have some PS5 or Series X in stock, and we'll sell one to you. Because remember, Best Buy and most stores, in fact, since November last year, all fulfillment of these consoles has largely been online orders. So you have to mess with Walmart.com, PlayStation Direct, Microsoft.com, Target, Ant Online, wherever you're deciding to try and buy one of these things, and that's why it's been so frustrating, because you're, refreshing, and now you've got these, digital queue lines, and there's not much that you can do outside of just trying over and over again. But now what we have and what we saw was like more of a traditional console launch, where you just go to a store and you camp out, and that's what people were doing upwards of 10, 12 hours in advance outside of Best Buys with tents, lawn chairs and all, and it's really just a sight to see. It's really, it's just weird, right? We're almost a year, 10 months into PS5 and Series X, people are still doing this, and they're still doing it on top of the fact that they're selling more than their predecessors. More of these consoles are being made, but this was people's first real opportunity to physically try and go out and buy one versus the frustration of buying one online. And it's understandable to maybe say, whatever, I'll just wait 10 hours and get one easy peasy that way, assuming that you have a good spot in line with your local store. But we did see a lot of drops this past week. So PS Direct had like 3 or 4 queues go up, some with you need the invite for your email, which keep in mind, you should keep checking that email if you're trying to buy PS5 still. They are sending out invites, so it's a little bit more secure of trying to secure a console, but they do that alongside normal queues where you still have a chance of buying one regularly. In fact, the last drop, I just got another console to give to somebody else who's been trying to get one for a while. So between that, GameStop, I think they've got an event coming up next week. There's actually either production has increased or maybe demand is lightening up just a little bit. But we are seeing more frequent console drops, and that's going to help your chances to hopefully buy a PS5 before its first anniversary. Now, moving on to our next story, Sony fixed a major issue with that PS4 9.0 firmware update, and they didn't even really put this in the changelog or say anything about it whatsoever. And what's even more interesting is that they didn't acknowledge this problem, and now they fixed it without acknowledging it either. But it's the C-bomb issue. If you remember this about 4 or 5 months ago, this was brought to everybody's attention on Twitter, and a few sites picked this up, but it's a matter of that CR2032 battery that lives inside every single PS3, 4, and 5 console. If it dies, then you might have a problem playing certain games offline. So PS3, this was a problem because disc playback would work no matter what. Offline, online, dead battery, working battery. However, digital games would not work if you can't connect to PSN and re-authenticate to fix that battery, because what that battery does is it keeps track of the time on the console. So when you earn a trophy, it knows that you earned it on so-and-so time and date, and the next time you resync to PSN, and it can properly sync that trophy over. That's essentially what it's there for. Right now on PS4, this was a big issue, because if you're offline and your battery is dead, you can't start PS4 discs. Physical discs offline will not start with a dead battery. So the major crux of the issue is that someday, doesn't have to be today, tomorrow, next year, but possibly 10, 15 years down the road, when the PlayStation Network shuts down for, say, all PS4 consoles, in theory, you've got a bunch of e-waste because those consoles are going to be ticking time bombs. That's why it was called the C-bomb issue. Once all those batteries die and they can't re-authenticate in some way, shape, or form, just replacing it doesn't work. You have to resync with PSN so they're properly aligned. But if you can't do that, then you have a bunch of useless PS4 discs and PS4 consoles. Mind you, I guess PS4 discs would be usable for an extended period of time. Probably they could outlive the, I don't know, what's the life expectancy of a Blu-ray disc? They're pretty strong, so I'm not sure disc rot would get to them anytime soon, but it's just the point of, like, they could be played on PS5s well after PS4 is, let's say, all said and done. But I digress. The thing is, we've got a situation where these discs and consoles would be tied to, PSN connectivity. We know that PS3, while it's going to keep going for now, that's not going to stay around forever. And that's actually still not solved for digital software. If you have a bunch of digital games on PS3, once PSN's over and your battery dies, that's going to be a problem. Point is, PS4 9.0 did fix this. So if you're on 9.0, you can actually let your battery die or take it out entirely, and you can keep playing PS4 discs offline. You can install games. Modern Vintage Gamer put up a pretty good video doing some testing, so this is all on camera for you to see. It's all proven. 9.0 actually did address this. And what's amazing is that it seems as though this is definitely something that Sony didn't actually think of. Like, it's a matter of, like, it's not a licensing issue or something where they were actively, like, against this. It seems like this was just a massive oversight on their part. And it might also explain why PS3 doesn't have this problem with discs, because when PS3 launched, it did not have trophy support at all. It didn't get it until 2008. And with PS4 and up, it is tied to the CR2032 battery. It's there for trophies as a way to measure when you earned it, and the date and time, and being able to sync it to PSN. It's kind of like an anti-cheat thing, but it's tied directly to trophies. And so actually now, if the battery does die and you earn a trophy, you have no date and time, and if you sync back to PSN, I think it still goes up there, just it doesn't show when you actually earned it. Not 100% sure on what happens there, but the disc playback, it's confirmed. It's there. That's fantastic. So it's actually pertinent that you have your PS4s updated to 9.0. This is great for game preservation, what I think really is misunderstood about this is where these consoles go after you're done with them. And for a lot of second and third world countries where buying a PS5 would be like impossible for them for the next 15, 20 years, they're looking at PS4 today, and they're going to get those PS4s, and they're going to play them offline, and they're going to want to be able to play them and not have to go through the hassle of servicing them or connecting them to a very poor, home internet or non-existent home internet. It's just great that these consoles have a much longer extended life, and it's fantastic that Sony actually did address this problem, even if they didn't actually publicly say anything about it. So huge shout out to John Doyle and the entire team moderating the Does It Play Twitter account, Lance McDonald for pointing this out, MVG also posting a video pretty quickly to demonstrate this. This is a huge win, even if you don't care about it. It's great to see. Now, I would just love to see this problem get addressed for PS3 digital games, because that's going to be a problem sooner rather than the PS4 one that we just had fixed. Now, while we're on the topic of system firmware and Sony fixing things that they didn't actually call out directly, we can also say this for PS5 as well with the recent 21 or 22.0, oh god, I'm not going to go through it again. That recent big update with all the features, I think this was actually in the changelog where it said improvement to game performance for some titles, which it's like, what does that really mean, right? It's in the same veins of like a 0.1 update where it says it's an improvement to overall system software stability, and it's like, how do you demonstratively show that? And well, as part of last week's discussion for Gamers Nexus and Digital Foundry, when they were going over the differences between the two PS5 models, recently Digital Foundry pointed out that as part of their testing, they had actually caught wind of this, or rather they ran into that difference of the improvement of certain games and their overall performance. So when testing unlocked frame rates in fidelity modes for some of these games, they actually had these two PS5s, one running on beta firmware and one running on retail firmware. And what they found out was the one running on the latest firmware, the recent release, they actually saw that they had a slight increase of frames per second. We're talking like 2-3 frames per second in perhaps the biggest difference, but really in their footage you can still see that it's maybe only 1 or 2 on average higher, which they were curiously wondering during testing, why is there that much of a difference? It's close enough, but in theory you're wondering, okay, there is this one model chip and all PS5s should behave exactly the same, and that's not really what was happening. So I think that's why they pointed it out as a slight margin of error, but essentially they had to like alter the video in such a way where they had to account for this thing that they didn't even realize had happened when they were doing their testing. So they actually ran into that very slight improvement to PS5 software with this recent firmware update. So there you go. That's what it looks like when we have a very minor improvement with firmware updates. Now, moving on to our recently acquired PlayStation studio, which would be Firesprite, over on LinkedIn, they had a new job listing for a development director, and this job listing says, and I quote, "We're looking for a development director to assist with all aspects of planning and delivery on a dark narrative adventure with genre-defining goals. Firesprite is a PlayStation studio." That's important to mention at the bottom because, well, prior to the acquisition, they had job listings for, I believe, it was a multiplayer game in this dark narrative adventure title, which after the acquisition, and they were asked about these games, they wouldn't say anything about it. But remember, they're a very large team. They've got about 250-something staff, and so while their portfolio is rather small, we know that they're very capable of doing multiple projects at the same time. And so now that the acquisition is completed and they're still hiring for this project, then we can say with some certainty here that this definitely is a project that is intended to see a full release. Now that might seem obvious, but who knows, after the acquisition, maybe Sony said shut this one down, start something else. But really, this could also be they saw this vertical slice of this dark narrative game and they thought, oh yeah, we like what we're seeing. That might have facilitated, amongst other things, the acquisition talks, and now it's like, okay, we'll give you the budget, the resources to get this thing off the ground. And that's this is actually what's getting me pretty somewhat excited about this, right? I understand that it's not nearly as high profile as other acquisitions or things that are coming in Sony's pipeline, but when we look at other top tier developers under PlayStation Studios, you kind of expect, okay, something big and exciting is going to come. But with Firesprite, it's like they don't really have that large portfolio. I want to see what they do as a somewhat brand new team under the PlayStation Studios umbrella, right? My thing was, they're not a household name. They're not this huge top tier developer that's well known and has shipped, a bunch of successful games in a 20-year period. It's not like that. The talent is there, the talent of shipping, high quality products for 20 years, but it's just, that Sony probably didn't have to pay that much for this team. So there might be an exciting prospect of what they put out now that they, again, are under that umbrella, and we have nothing to really reference outside of like each individual team member, which that's not even really a good way to look at it, right? You need a whole team to come together and make something for it to be really special, and that's where I want to see what Firesprite does. Now, with all that said, it is time to get to Let's Talk Plus, the weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway, where one of you can win a $10 PSN code. I would like to congratulate this viewer right here. I'll be contacting you very soon via email or Twitter, and if you would like to win a $10 PSN code, it's very easy. Follow the link down below. Supporting this channel, a number of ways can gain you an entry, and I'll announce the winner next week because I'm trying to help pay for your games. Those are all the stories that I want to talk about with you all from this past week. Our Tuesday video was PS5 faceplates and accessories. There's a lot of really weird things out there now, so I dressed up my PS5 in such a way where it's so ugly that maybe it kind of got better again. I don't know because I already put it back to stock, but I'll let you be the judge. You can go check that out. And then coming up, the video I talked about last week, it's taking longer than I thought. I'm hitting more and more roadblocks as I work on it, so whenever it gets uploaded, you'll know what I'm talking about, but I hope that will be ready soon. No clue when, though. But that's all I got for you in this week's closing housekeeping section. That's it. That concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Becker. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you all next Friday.